In the spring of 1978, I had a residence grant at the Wurlitzer Foundation in Taos, New Mexico. And at the time, I had no feeling for the Southwest. I certainly had no feeling for Pueblo Indians or Indians of any kind. I was there to work on a novel that actually was set in San Francisco and was sort of a murder mystery. But when I got to Taos, everyone at the foundation said, well, now that you're here, you absolutely have to start going to Indian dances. And I thought, oh boy, yeah, sure. I thought I knew everything about Indian dances. And a lot of that viewpoint was the same that my brother had written a poem about called Powwow. And it takes a very dim and unpleasant view of a traditional standard Indian powwow, feathers, people dancing around, whooping and hollering, showing really no understanding at all of what was going on there. But that was my understanding. So I agreed to go to this dance. Anyway, the first dance that I went to was a corn dance at San Felipe Pueblo. And we joined the people in this very large plaza in the middle of all these stucco buildings and sat on the ground and just sort of taking it easy. And first to come into the plaza was a group of singers and a drummer, and they had what's known as a belly drum, a very tall, long drum. They call it a belly drum because as it's beating, it's really reverberating up through the ground, and when it stops, you actually feel it in the pit of your stomach for a while. They came out and started to chant. And clear over in the far edge of the Pueblo came these two lines of dancers. There'd be two men and maybe two women, and then two men, two women, maybe two children, two men. There must have been 150, maybe 200 of them. And the men all have sleigh bells on their arms and turtle shell rattles, and they have a rattle in their hand. And the dancing sort of consisted of running in place, though making very, very small progress. And they're sort of jingling, and it's hum, 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 hum. And the women, their steps are sort of like patting the ground. They're not chugging up and down, they're patting. And they snaked around side by side all around this plaza for about an hour. And then they went off back in the corner where they was. And I thought, okay. Another drummer comes out from the other corner. And there's another 150, 200 people dancing. And they do this same dance, maybe for an hour. And then they go out. And then the first group comes back in. These are the people from the Pueblo. They're not doing this as an entertainment. They are really, this is it. And as I learned later, the Indians will say, well, you know, there are a number of the dancers who really aren't dancing. But there's a number of the spectators who are dancing. And that type of idea really got me thinking, boy, I don't know what's going on here. Why are these people dancing? We're so used to the Disney concept that everything is for our entertainment. They didn't care whether we were there or not. They were going to do it themselves, in and of themselves, for the community. It wasn't like a powwow where you could think they were doing, sort of recreating what used to be war dances, eagle dances. This was a very, very sacred thing to them. And I thought, I have to find out about this. So I started reading as much as I could about the Rio Grande Pueblos, which were all the ones between Santa Fe and Taos. And that led me to the Hopi. Because the other Indian tribes, as I understand it, and a lot of this is just what they let us know, the other Indian Pueblos think of the Hopi as the keepers of the spiritual center at least of this continent, maybe of the entire world. And that led me to studying and getting familiar with Kachinas. The term Kachina, and I believe that it says this in the book, it's been a little while since I've read it, actually involves three different meanings. They're the Kachina dolls that we've seen in gift shops, and most of those are very highly carved and very detailed. The real Kachina dolls are given to children to learn the different ones, and they're very simplistic and very, very basic. Then there's the Kachina dancers, you might say. They are, for lack of a better word, impersonating the Kachina. But that's not it. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Then there are the Kachinas themselves. Kachinas are like angels. They're not gods. They're messengers to the gods. And they live 6 months of the year in the San Francisco mountains there in Arizona. And then they come and live and visit the Hopi villages. And the thing, though, with the masks, the different Kachina masks, they're revered and kept in a place of honor in the homes where between dances. And the Hopi believe that when you put on the mask, you become the Kachina. You're not the impersonator. You are actually the Kachina. It's similar, or probably the same principle, in the Catholic Mass, when the priest raises the host and says, "This is the body of Christ." It is the body of Christ, if you're Catholic and if you believe that. Well, for the Hopi, when you put on the mask, you are that spiritual being. Those are real power figures. And I had gone to Hopi and seen a few of the dances, which are quite unlike anything one will ever see. And it was hard to believe that these dances were still going on after centuries. And again, they were not performances. They were not done for the people that come there. They were religious ceremonies. And that got me thinking more about how that might work in a story. For instance, suppose you woke up one morning and found a Kachina in your backyard. It's conceivable that it could happen because they do travel around, the single ones, the chief Kachinas. They do make pilgrimages themselves. They go to special places and perform ceremonies. The two that really interested me were one's called Iototo, who is the chief of all Kachinas, and his best friend, Aholi.